Hey, welcome to the definitive resource all about skills. I currently run a business that does over $4 million a year in profit, and I manage it primarily through AI, agents, and skills. And I teach over 2,000 people how to do the same thing. I think a lot of demos and walkthroughs of skills right now are like really flashy, and they're typically centered around the personal assistant angle. But a lot of people are leaving tons of money on the table because they're not applying them to specific business use cases that actually tend to produce large returns on investment. And so what I wanted to do in this resource is I just wanted to walk you guys through what that actually looks like. I'm going to start by showing you guys examples of a bunch of skills that I currently use in my $4 million a year business, skills that other people are currently using across a variety of different industries like e-com, service businesses, consulting, and so on. And then I'm going to show you guys how to build them. And we're not just going to build cookie cutter skills that are glorified personal assistants, but skills that you guys could actually implement in your business to do the work of dozens of people in just a few minutes. Okay, so everything you need is in the link in the description. It'll give you guys these skills so you guys could use them across your own business. It'll also give you guys the framework that you could use to build new ones, regardless of whatever your use case is. No fluff. Let's get right into it. So if you don't know what I'm looking at right now, this is Anti-Gravity running 5 different Claude Code plugins. If you guys are new or unfamiliar with this sort of interface, just check the link that I'm pasting right over here. It'll walk you through everything from like what the icons here mean to, how to communicate with Claude Code and Gemini and other, agentic coding platforms, literally from the ground up. So you'll know everything after that. But assuming you guys are somewhat comfortable, I want to show you guys 5 different skills today, and then I'll throw in a couple of additional bonuses. The first one over here is going to follow up with all of my leads. So if you guys are running a business at really any level of revenue over a few $1,000s a month, you probably have something akin to like a list of leads or a list of contacts. This type of thing is typically referred to as a customer relationship manager. And in general, what you do is you store leads at different areas along the pipeline from when you first met them all the way to close deals and money is in your pocket. And so I have an example one here with a bunch of leads at different stages: meeting booked, Jimmy Klin; proposal sent, Sarah Chen; Jessica Park, Aisha Mohammed, and so on and so on and so forth. And basically, right now, in order for me to move this pipeline forward, every day I just have to manually check in with all the leads. Well, I built a skill that effectively automates the entire process. In order to trigger this, all I need to go and do is go /follow-up nurture. Now, what this skill does is it goes through my pipeline. It identifies and captures all of the conversations I've ever had with any of these prospects. So it actually goes through all of my email chains and so on and so forth. And then it uses a couple of templates to personalize check-ins depending on where they are. So, if a meeting has been booked, but we haven't actually attended it, it might check in with Jimmy and say, "Hey, Jimmy, how's it going? Just wanted to check in on our meeting in a couple of days. Really excited to have it." If it's to Sarah and maybe we send a $2,500 quote for a specific type of product, I'd be like, "Hey, Sarah, hope you've had a lovely week so far. Just wanted to circle back on X, Y, and Z proposal. Let me know if you have any questions." The whole key here is we do this really informally and then really casually, so they think it's us. I think a big problem that a lot of these automated follow-up services typically run into is they just use really like non-human language. It's very clear, and I think prospects can tell when an LLM does the following up for them. But I also like the fact that this just does it all in one shot. And so the workflow is literally like you just wake up in the morning, or your salesperson wakes up in the morning, they go /follow-up nurture, they immediately clear out their whole pipeline of follow-ups, and then they can just focus on acquiring new business. What's also cool is it does all this in the tone of voice and in the same chain of conversation as the initial email. And so in this case, this is an email that I sent to Mr. James that said, "Hey, James, circling back on the proposal, let me know if I can answer any Qs." This is another one that I sent to Priya that said, "Hi, Priya, hope you had a great week checking in on that test brief. Let me know where we're at." This just continuously customizes based off where the person is. And then it also gets to pull in, context and more or less everything that you currently talked about. So you're not just repeating the same thing. This also goes through and then it lists all of the follow-ups that I've made to every single person. So you can see here, we're signing off slightly differently between them. We're using reply chains and stuff like that to stay within the same thread. And I'm going to give you guys that for free. I use it basically every day. This second flow is basically a one-shot thumbnail generator. I have this funny image of John Hamm or Don Draper in Mad Men, if you guys are familiar. And this image went viral a little while ago. It's all about vibes and whatnot. And so I figured, as somebody making videos on vibe coding and agentic platforms, I would try and reproduce the thumbnail. But instead of doing it manually, I'm actually just going to say reproduce the John Hamm thumbnail, use similar lighting, etc. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take this thumbnail or this image, which has already been created, then it's going to go get my face, and then it's just going to superimpose my face onto that image in a really realistic looking way. It's also, instead of just generating one variant, going to generate multiple so that we can pick and choose which one looks the best. And also because not all AI outputs are perfect. This is an example of the finished product, and we did that just in a few seconds. I also ran it again so you guys could see even more, but I mean, just like going back and forth between this, pretty freaking close, right? However, there are some important differences. The people in the background are different. The lighting is just a tiny bit different, and so on and so forth. And I mean, we've generated more. I have this running again in the background. This one's with like a darker lighting and different tone. I don't know. This one here is sort of like matrix style blue and sepia. And so all these are just a little bit different. One's that it's not just like a one-to-one rip of the source image, but also because, I get to pick and choose variants that I like the most. And so in my case, I really like this one. I think this like did the most justice to my face. And this is probably the one I'm going to use for my video. By the way, despite the fact that I hate when people do this to me, I'm going to do it to you. If you like this sort of thing, please subscribe. Something like 69% of you guys aren't subscribed for some reason. So that's 2 out of every 3 people that I'm talking to right now. And it just significantly impacts my channel's ability to grow. So if I've given you anything, any value at any point in time over the course of this video or any others, just click that button for me. You'd be doing me a big solid. Okay, back to the video. This next one here is all about scraping leads. And so I could actually just say, scrape me 50 management consultants in, I don't know, let's just say Arizona. And what this will do is it'll go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is currently the highest quality place that you can get information about real human beings. It then creates a bunch of LinkedIn search URLs. And in case you guys didn't know, LinkedIn Sales Navigator allows you to filter people really granularly based off things like what their job title is, where they live, their various seniority levels, their industry. And then basically I just get a list, not within Sales Navigator, but in a Google Sheet with these people and then all of their email addresses. And like pre-existing solutions exist to do this for Apollo and Apify, but I don't think there's like currently a big one for LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And the reason why that's valuable is because there is no better source right now for B2B lead data than LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's the most current. Most other services just scrape from there anyway. And as a result, I get to go straight to the source and then just ask a system for what I want in natural language. So within, 3 or 4 minutes, I end up with a nicely optimized list of high quality leads with probably like the highest deliverability out of more or less any source that you could get today. And then you end up with a really high quality list of people, literal, their full names, first names, last names, email addresses, and so on and so forth that we've sourced basically directly from LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is done pretty effectively via cost as well. And then the fact that it's just going to occur in the background while I do other tasks, it can retest its leads, it can figure out like the best filters to use and so on and so forth, eliminates a fair amount of my own day-to-day work as somebody that runs like a growth management agency. This next one here writes my cold email campaigns. So for those of you guys that don't know, a cold email is something that goes to somebody who you haven't actually talked to before, hence why it's cold. And then it tries to sell them on some service. And so I run cold emails just as my day-to-day for a couple of clients. Essentially, what I commonly have to do is I have to iterate and change cold email campaigns based off of a new client's information. And so what I want to show you guys is basically how you can automate this process. I am now going to use the / convention. I'll go cold-email-campaigns. Sorry, I think that's actually a /. And this will basically ask you, hey, what are the details of the client? And now I'm just going to voice transcribe and say, the client is 1 second to copy. Their offer is they want to write free 500-word sample articles with no strings attached. Find the similar campaigns and then use those as inspiration. I'm then going to feed that in. And then my skill is going to go through and then essentially duplicate high-performing pre-existing campaigns within my cold email platform, and then rewrite them so that they're as similar and high quality as humanly possible for that given niche. Then sets it all up in my cold email platform. So again, a step that previously might have taken me 30 to 60 minutes just logistically is now taken care of. And then obviously all the offer management and stuff like that is also handled entirely autonomously. So yeah, I mean, this takes something that maybe 3 or 4 hours into something that takes minutes. And then afterwards, we end up with a bunch of different campaigns. This is an example of one of them that says for, I don't know, Nick, just wrote you a blog post. Hey, Nick, big fan of your work, was on 1 Second Copy site earlier, thought I'd write you a free 500-word sample article with a twist. I know giving value up front is how you form connections, so I thought I'd start with that. If you have any interest, just reply and I'll send it right over. If you want more, just say the word. Got a few other interesting pieces of content for you. It also gives you different variants that you could use to split test, and then also even like a little follow-up. So in that way, me just templating out like 80, 90% of my work significantly streamlines the actual offer building process. process. And nowadays, because the models themselves are getting really good, like I was doing this with Opus 4.5, now I'm doing it with Opus 4.6. Because the models are getting really good, like half the time I don't actually make a change. I just say, okay, sure, let's give this a test and we'll see how this performs relative to some of the other ones. The last skill I want to show you is a simple website builder. Basically, to make a long story short, we do a fair amount of outreach. My goal here is I wanted a way to quickly and easily whip up high quality, reasonably templated, but also pretty unique websites for clients or prospects, and then just send them over whether or not I have their business. I was thinking about ways to offer more value while reaching out to people cold, and me literally building like end-to-end high-quality websites and then giving them a link that they could use to access them in one shot. It's probably like the biggest value add that you can get so far. So this is like very, very low-hanging fruit. And I would also say that there's quite room right now to do knowledge arbitrage, where basically because you have access to tools like this, and then most prospects don't, you could offer either completely free websites, or you could offer like a really simple or templated website or something like that in order to really blow their socks off. When it's done, it actually pushes this to Netlify, which is a hosting service that lets me get a website like this. Then I can actually just click this link, and then I have the website right over here. And I don't think you guys could see it so super clearly, but it's pretty high quality. It uses its own customized prompt in order to build slightly different navigation bars and menus, and then different content types and stuff like that. And then you end up with, I think, what most people consider to be pretty high quality. In case you guys are interested, I showcased a really similar builder on my Claude Code course a little while ago, and then my Gemini course as well. This is pretty high quality, right? I think if an average person were to get a website like this for free, they'd probably be like, no way, really? There has to be a catch. But nowadays you can generate these deliverables for basically cents on the dollar, and then get like high quality animations and stuff like that with literally you just putting one prompt. So obviously I wanted to build a bunch of economically valuable skills, and I have dozens more, probably close to 30 or 40 right now, that manage most aspects of my business. But I also wanted to show you guys, sorry, that's my alarm here. I wanted to show you guys how easy it was also just to build skills that handle like really nuanced one-off things. And so in addition, I also built a couple of cool ones that I want to show you. One called WeWork Booking, another called Amazon Shopping. And I mean, like, these aren't even really as businessy as they are me just like dealing with a problem that I had. So for the WeWork one, WeWork is a shared co-working space, which basically allows you to book and then show up sometime in the next few hours. You have access to things like kombucha on tap sometimes, I don't know, free coffee. Well, it's not free. I guess you're paying for it. Looks like their marketing's worked on me. But to make a long story short, in order for me to access WeWork, I need to like book ahead every day. And one day I tried booking the same day, and then I showed up and my card reader didn't work. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, it's usually good to book ahead because sometimes the card reader takes time to sync. And I was like, well, this sucks. I don't want to freaking do this. And then I realized, like, wait a second, I have Claude now. So why don't I just write a skill that just automatically books me every single day for like the next 30 days? And so that's what I did. I basically just took like 30 seconds of my day. Then I said, hey, write me a skill that books me in for WeWork. So when I want to access it, I just go book me into WeWork. Then this goes and books me automatically for like the next 30 days ahead using some credentials that I've already set up. And then it also like actually literally opens up a tab. And so you can see this is doing it right here at the one that I currently frequent on Stephen Avenue Place. So I'm just going to say, hey, hit me, give this a book, and then it'll go through and actually make like HTTP requests behind the scenes in order to push. If necessary, it'll actually also open up WeWork so you could see it actually like do the freaking desk bookings, which is wild. And watching this thing go is pretty neat. And then after I built this and then, did all of the WeWork bookings, I also naturally got more interested in like, what could I automate with my browser? And I ended up creating another skill. So that was a pretty interesting one-off build. Takes just like 30 seconds. As you see there, you just have to log into whatever service and then say, hey, I want you to automate this with Chrome DevTools MCP. I'll show you guys how to do that as well. But I was also kind of interested in what else I could automate that was just kind of like a silly personal task that I usually have to do. And one thing that I do nowadays quite a bit is like I just buy stuff off Amazon and then I have it shipped directly to my door. And I do that because I think, I'm making a fair amount of money and I don't really want to drive all the way over to Home Depot or whatever because it'll just consume a lot of time and energy and ultimately be unnecessary. Why not pay for the premium of having somebody else do it? The only issue is, as I'm sure you guys know, anybody here that shops on Amazon, there's like a bajillion bullshit listings nowadays with like crappy SEO, and they try and use every term to rank for everything. So what I did is I just built a really simple Chrome DevTools MCP called Amazon Shopping. And what I do is I simply say, hey, find me the best floss on Amazon. It then loads up the Amazon skill right over here, and then it opens up Amazon, in my case, CA. And I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller here so you guys can't see my postal code. And then it automates the process of like going through Amazon and then looking for whatever the heck I want. So in my case, I'm looking for dental floss, right? Well, it's just going to open up one little thing here, and then it's going to go through and it's going to compare all of the dental floss with each other to find basically the best combination of cost and then effectiveness that does whatever I want. And at the end of it here, you can see we have all of the products that it's recommending, literally in just like a little sheet so I can give this a quick click. We also have the cost, the popularity, the why buy, and so on and so forth. And, he basically uses all these things in order to recommend them. So I basically built like a personal shopper app. I've done the same thing with like grocery delivery, which is pretty cool. So I just one-shot my grocery delivery. I go on, Instacart or another related service, click a few buttons, and then boom, I'm basically done for the rest of the year. And, you could build these sorts of one-off systems at this point now with Opus 4.6, GPT 5.2, 5.3, or Gemini 3.1, whatever model you want to use, whether or not you're using CLAUDE or some other platform. Okay. Now that you guys have seen at least a little bit about what I think like actual helpful, useful skills that realistically move the needle, not just glorified, personal assistant demos look like, let me show you guys how to actually go ahead and then build them. Okay. So first, if it's not already abundantly clear, skills are basically the evolution of standard operating procedures just for agents. Whereas SOPs and checklists are for human beings for the most part, skills are for these new AI agent intelligences. And just as such, you wouldn't really just give a checklist over to an agent and say, do it. You'd have to translate its language just a little bit into sort of like the native format that the agent understands. So a brief example here, if I have maybe a checklist and it's make P, B, and J sandwich, and I work at a company where all we do all day is make PB and J sandwiches. Boy, would I love to live there. You can imagine how new hires go their very first day, and then they're given a checklist of tasks. And it's basically take bread out of basket, put jam on one side, put peanut butter on the other side. And then maybe one final one that just says stick them together. So this might be for a human, and essentially as a human goes through it, what do? We obviously check all of these tasks off. That's just how standard operating procedures are in business. They just, for the most part, standardize things, hence the name. Because this is organized a little bit differently for agents than, for human beings, we organize them into what are called markdown or .md files. And these markdown files are basically just text files with a little bit of a twist. For instance, I have a markdown or .md file open over here. If I try and create a new file here, and then I call it skillspec.txt, and then I paste everything in, you notice how everything is the same color? Whereas if I go back to that markdown variant, we all of a sudden have blue, we have orange, we even have some green. Well, the way that markdown files work is they take base data, and then they also take a little bit of formatting, and then they apply the formatting to the base data, just so that it's a little bit easier to see, a little bit more interpretable. And so if you guys could tell, the data that we're marking up here, okay, funnily because it's called markdown, but the data that we're changing the color of and stuff like that is usually prepended with a couple of symbols. The first symbol here is this little hashtag. This always refers to like a header. And so you can kind of think of it like a chapter heading in a book. Another one are these sort of backticks here, which typically refer to files. There are a couple of other little tiny formatting things here, like links and so on and so forth, that you don't really get with TXT files. But hopefully you guys understand that it's not really that big of a deal to memorize everything in a markdown file. You just have to know that there's slightly different formatting compared to text files. The reason why is because you're never really going to have to make them yourself. All you're going to have to do is just give your agent some bullet points, usually a brief description, which I'll show you how to do, and then it'll combine all of that into the optimal markdown skill format for you. Now, unlike just a few months ago, today, every major provider on Earth, basically, so our OpenAIs, our Googles, I wrote Claude here, but I really meant Anthropic. They're all moving towards harnessing and then making skills generally available, just as part of like their LLMs. And so here you could see Anthropic has a page on their Claude code docs that say extend Claude with skills. These are the guys that sort of made skills up first. But because of popularity, a bunch of people that were OpenAI developers and stuff like that started talking about it and asking for it. And so they've created their own skills format. It's very, very close to the Claude Code skills format. And then also over here, the Gemini CLI, you can see you can add agent skills. Basically, no matter what framework or LLM or platform you're using, you can do the exact same thing. So my rule of thumb is if you guys have a standard operating procedure, if you have an SOP, you have a skill. Okay, all you really have to do is just copy that SOP from your business and feed it into Claude or Gemini or Codex and ask it to make a skill. As of the time of this recording, the skills spec or definition is, it's not like baked directly into the models. So the one thing that you have to do in addition to that is you basically have to give it the skill spec and then ask it to turn your task list into a skill. But assuming you can, drag a file into your freaking working directory, and assuming you have any SOPs at all, even poorly written ones, you now basically have an agent capable of doing a big chunk of your knowledge work. Once you're done with this, you just ask the agent to run it at least once because you have to test it end to end. On the first run, if the agent needs something else, it'll ask you for it. Otherwise, it'll build the asset itself. So maybe like an Excel file or something like that. It'll actually put that together for you. Although obviously, if you have assets like some context or PDFs or whatever, you can provide them no problem. And then assuming that you've prompted it right with the spec that I'm going to provide you, every time the skill runs after that, if the agent finds a mistake while doing it, or maybe a service is out or it doesn't have the knowledge it needs, it'll automatically figure out how to solve it, and then it'll patch the skill for you. And so in that way, here's the real power of skills. They're self-annealing over time. They heal themselves, they get better, and they improve constantly. Much like an ambitious, intelligent staff member who sees a checklist, notices that there's a gap, and then chooses to fill it. Skills are the same thing, just with agents, which is what makes them so incredible. So why don't we get started and produce ourselves some skills, and then as we produce and then shortly after, I'll also run through the special directory of .claude/skills, which with Claude is how you organize these things. I'll also touch on just a couple of other ones in case you're using a different LLM, but for the most part, they're going to be exactly the same. So the very first thing you need to do is you need to grab the skillspec.md, and you can grab that down below from the Google Drive link. It's free. As mentioned, you don't need to sign up or give me your email. I don't need it. I have enough of those. And what you're going to see in here is basically the condensed spec or definition of skills, as well as the file structure, all the locations, all the different formatting options and stuff like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this to our agent alongside our request so that it can just figure out how to put together the highest quality skills for us. What I did in order to put this together, by the way, is I just went over to Anthropic's Claude Code docs with skills page. I copied the entire thing, fed it back into the LLM, and then just said, hey, I want you to really, really shorten this, compress this, significantly increase the information density, because I don't want this to be 500 lines. I want this to be, 150 to 200. Okay, so once we have this, basically what we do is we just make this our Claude.md. Just so we're all on the same page here, Claude.md is just the prompt that's injected at the top of every new conversation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this and just call this old Claude.md. And this one here is going to be the new Claude.md or just Claude.md. Any file in your root directory that contains the capital CLAUDE .lowercase.md will automatically be prepended and added to the prompt. And so what we do is basically by doing this, every workspace we're in is just automatically going to know what skills are. If you have other stuff in your Claude.md, you can also just copy this and then paste this as well. Although, at least for the purposes of creating skills, I recommend just being as short and straightforward and basically having this in as few lines as humanly possible. Next up, to build your skill, just open up a new agent window. So I've just done that here with Claude Code, and then just tell it what you want it to do. I'm going to use a voice transcription tool, WhisperFlow, just to put in my own SOP. What I want to do, at least for this demo, is just build a simple inbox cleanup tool that just goes through my inbox. It then opens up all of the unread messages and then just immediately reads all the ones that are pointless and sort of, invoice reminders or follow-ups about whatever, or simple templates. And then I want it to highlight, realistically, the high priority emails in my inbox. So I just have a short list of everything. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. I'm just going to hold this little key down and then say, I'd like to build a Claude Code skill that goes through my inbox, identifies all unread messages, reads all of the unread messages, and then marks as read all of the ones that aren't important to me or high priority. My definition for important is basically anything that isn't automatically generated. If the email is automatically generated by like a service, or it's a simple notification email or whatever, it's not important. If the email is written by like some cold email copywriting fella who's trying to reach out and get my business, it's not important. The only stuff that is important are emails that are personalized, customized, and that give off the vibe that they were written basically just for me. Once we're done, we're going to feed that right in. Then we're going to go ahead and build it. The very first thing it's going to do is look at all of the existing skills and any Gmail code inside of my workspace to see if there's anything that it could use. And it's doing this because, as human beings go, we don't really want to rebuild the wheel if we don't have to, right? So this is it just reading everything right now. You can see that it's also changed to plan mode. That's why that little thing in the bottom left-hand corner is changed alongside that red bypass permissions color to blue. This happens more or less anytime you try and build something that it would consider to be even slightly complicated. It wants to go into plan mode so that it can plan out the build of the skill. Now, it correctly went through and found that I had a couple of configuration files that allowed it to use different emails here. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to use this one. Obviously, if you didn't have this, it would just ask you what email do you want to set up. Now what it's going to do is actually create the skill.md. It's also going to create a script for me, which looks like it's going to call inbox_cleaner. Then afterwards, it's going to test it end to end. Why? Because that's just what's in our spec sheet. We basically tell it how to do all of this stuff natively. Now what it's going to do is create the script. You can see that because I have a pre-existing skill, that follow-up one that I was showing you guys, it gets to borrow based off of that. And you can see that it's actually gone ahead and wrote the script. If I go to inbox_cleaner here and actually look at the skill.md, you can see it right over here. If we just make this a little bit bigger, let's move this here so we could focus on this. Basically what we have is a step-by-step guide for a future agent on how to do the task that I just asked it to. And you'll see that it's now been organized in a very particular way. For instance, there are these 3 dashes up at the top, 3 dashes underneath this section. There's a name key that says inbox cleaner, a description key that says clean up Gmail inbox by reading all unread emails, using AI to identify which ones are generally important, and marking the rest as read. Use when cleaning inbox, triaging email, or clearing unread notifications. Then it also allows it to use some tools. Now you may be wondering, I think these two are pretty self-explanatory, but why is it allowing certain tools? Well, Claude and all other LLMs basically have access to some little pieces of software under the hood. Like they can read files, they can grep, glob, or bash. And these are just various like command line utilities that allow it to look through files, look for specific sections, and so on and so forth. And so what we've done with this skill, it's almost like a sub-agent. We've basically given it the ability to do these sorts of things when we invoke or instantiate this. Aside from that, we have the title, we have the goal, what counts as important, what gets marked as read. Notice how it basically took everything that I have provided it in just a few lines of voice transcription and then turned this into a pretty coherent and then consistent SOP. Now going back to the actual building thread here, it's actually gone ahead, wrote the script, and now it's doing the classification. If we give this button a quick little click, you could see that it's now doing it in batches of 10, which I didn't even ask it to. It's identified which ones it considers important, which ones are not important. And now it's saying, hey, do you want me to mark these 97 emails as read now? I don't actually want it to mark the 97 as read. What I want it to do is I want it to show me what they are so that I could tell it which ones are right. So I'll say, no, I'd actually like you to show me all of the 97 that you marked as read so that I could take a look and tell you if there are any exceptions. Now what it's going to do is give me a big list of all of the emails. And as you can see here, it has correctly identified that 79 of the emails I got were from a broken make scenario. So that's pretty interesting. Obviously, these are more or less exactly the sorts of emails I don't really want to. One is some normal commission notification from Referral Stack. Another's a subscription renewal for that voice transcription flow. Another's from Bright Data. Another's from whatever company. I have a bunch of cold outreach over here. I have sponsorship pitches, 1-word yes reply to lead magnet. I guess what I'm trying to say is this did a really good job. There isn't a single email here that I actually really care about. So I'm just going to say, nope, mark all as read. That's pretty sweet, right? Now, at any point in time, I could open up a new Claude instance, and we have to go new just because of how skills work, Then we can go /inbox cleaner, and then we can run it. And because we are running based off of this SOP, it's always going to run in the exact same way. It's going to be repeatable, consistent, and dependable. Also, if it runs into any issue, let's say the script doesn't work, let's say there's an API rate limit or something like that, it will identify the problem and then automatically go through, fix it, and then rewrite its own skill. In my case, I've got a lot of unread emails. So I think what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I've got a ton of unreads. Could you actually go through and fetch 1,000 instead of 100? And now I have the ability also to modify the way that this skill works just a little bit so that instead of the base 100, maybe I can do 1,000. Maybe I could pass in a flag like -A, and that stands for amount, and then I can do, you can see that's actually what's going on under the hood. It's passing a number 1,000 to said script. Now that you guys see how these skills actually work in practice and how easy it is to build one as long as you have the right spec sheet, I just want to really quickly deconstruct the various parts of this file to make sure that you guys understand how all of this stuff works and what each of these parts are for. Okay, so you guys have probably already noticed these three little dots here are really different from all the formatting elsewhere. What this basically is, in at least Markdown speak, is something called front matter. Front matter is a highly optimized way of basically putting a tiny summary at the beginning of any Markdown file. Remember how there's different fields and colors like keys, headings, there's sort of more headings. I mean, there's a lot of different things here. Well, you can just think of front matter as being the same idea. It's just a different like variable or type. And the way that you start it is with these three dashes, and then you end it with these three dashes. And so this little summary is basically doing you a massive service by significantly reducing the number of tokens that you need to load into your context window at any point in time. If you think about it, what we could be doing every time we load this skill in, if I just copy this whole thing and go to a free word counting service, is we could be adding 373 words, which is approximately 500 tokens into context, okay? But with front matter, what we do is instead of storing the entire script into context and making it accessible to the model, what we do is we store a much smaller summary, which is closer to like 60 or 70 tokens. And then we say, hey, if the user calls inbox cleaner specifically, then and only then do I want you to load the other, 350 words or so. Okay. And so what this means is in practice, if I were to show you guys all of the different skills that are currently loaded into context, they basically all look like this. And so my prompt at the very beginning, just assuming I have these three skills, is always basically going to be my claude.md up here. Underneath, we're going to have our skills. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3. And then underneath, it'll be your prompt, which is basically whatever the heck you want to say. Hey, I want to do X, Y, Z. And so this is more or less the structure that every conversation with Claude, in my case, but obviously any LLM in yours, whether it's Gemini.md, agents.md, so on and so forth, is going to realistically look like. You'll have your prompt down here, but before then you'll have a bunch of hidden stuff. And then what's cool is, if you say, hey, I want to do follow-ups, what it's going to do is it's going to say follow-ups. Wait a second. I know that we have some follow-ups mentioned earlier on under the skills section. Okay, great. That means this must be a standardized skill. And then it'll go and actually load the whole follow-up nurture directly into its context, which will be the rest of this. And then it'll basically stick the rest right here and then resubmit the prompt. And now it knows everything that it needs to do in order to obviously get that right. So then the agent would go, okay, great. I have the skill spec right here. Let me follow each step. And then it'll go and, start with number 1, which is load pending leads. Number 2 for each pending lead, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, this actually has a term. This is called skill matching. Anytime a user types a request like, hey, get me 50 dental leads, it'll automatically scan those descriptions or that front matter for whatever the most relevant description is. It says find business leads here. It says find business leads here. It'll say, oh, this must be the one that they want. Then it'll load the full skill.md into context before finally calling some scripts, okay, and then giving you guys an output. And where you put those scripts don't really matter. The basic skill definition, I think, just bundles it all into one folder. You could put the script somewhere else if you want to keep them organized. And if you have other assets like PDFs or whatever, you can build whatever scheme you want to keep those files handy. The reason we do this, of course, is both for efficiency, because the less context in a model's context window at any point in time, the higher the quality of the output, but also for costs. Providers like Anthropic and so on and so forth actually don't want you to spend an arm and a leg, believe it or not. They want you to continue using their software, and in order to do so, they need to make it like reasonably cost efficient for you and deliver a high ROI to you at the same time. And so this concept of progressive disclosure is now not only really being applied to skills, but a lot of other things as well. And all this is, again, in the pursuit of reduced cost, reduced overhead. Okay, let's build 3 more skills with what we know now. And just for simplicity and to make this as fast as humanly possible, both for myself and for you guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up 3 separate Claude Code little plugin widgets here. And in the first, I'm going to switch all these to bypass permissions and make this a little bit smaller so you guys could see. And then in the first, I'm going to paste in skill number 1. In the second, I'll paste in this skill number 2. And the third, I'll paste in this skill number 3. And what I'm going to say is create skill 1, create skill 2, and create skill 3. And we're just going to trigger all 3 of these and see how they operate. So what skill 1 is it's a simple way to turn meeting notes to action items. We basically just paste in a meeting transcript and get a structured action item with owners and deadlines and so on and so forth. The idea here is to show you guys that a skill can be really nothing more than a well-written SOP, which doesn't even include Python scripts or anything like that. The second one is an invoice data extractor, which is basically going to be skill.md plus some Python script. So we're going to take a PDF invoice, then return structured JSON in the form of a vendor, amount, date, line items, and tax. And this is to help you guys see how skills can delegate deterministic work to code, aka we could use Python scripts and whatnot, like you guys have already seen. And then the third skill is going to be a content repurposer, which is going to let us take a transcript and then output a tweet thread, a LinkedIn post, and then a newsletter draft all in parallel. And the idea here is we're going to have templates. I'll show you guys some brief examples, and I'll also show you guys how this works with some instructions. And so before I was even finished reading this freaking thing, we're almost already done 2 out of the 3. Isn't that wild? Anyway, the first skill, pretty straightforward, just called meeting notes. It just processes meeting notes. So what we can do here, if we want, is we could say, hey, I want you to output specific elements of the meeting. In this case, it has some decisions, open questions, and so on and so forth. But I also want you to find and identify any contact information. So I'll say, hey, this is great. I want you to update the skill also to extract any contact information that's mentioned. I'm looking for things like email addresses, websites. I'm looking for phone numbers, and so on and so forth. Anything that somebody offhand mentions during the call. Sometimes we also specifically ask for this information for follow-up reasons. So it would be nice to have it in a structured sort of way. Over here, it's now created both files of the invoice data extractor. So we could see there's a skill.md here, which basically takes the PDF invoice, returns structured JSON with vendor. So in order for me to really appreciate how this works, I'm actually going to go and grab myself a brief little invoice, just feed it in an example, and then we'll see how it works. I see a couple of services here that have sample invoices. This one looks pretty good. Why don't I download this? I'll say example_invoice. What I want to do is I just want to feed this in right over here. And I'll say, great. Use this on example_invoice.pdf. Then over here, it looks like this is now done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find some of my own content and just feed that in, just as an example. So we'll go on my YouTube channel and I'll find something that is probably not 4 hours because that would take a lot of tokens for no purpose. This 10-minute one looks pretty good. Let's get my fat, ugly head to shut the heck up. I'll scroll down here to where it says show transcript. And then right now, just because it's an example, I'm just going to copy all the stuff in manually, but obviously you guys could do whatever you want with this. Going back here, I'll then paste this in. And what I want to do is I basically just want to see whether or not I can do all of those 3 things. I'm also going to take a quick peek here at the script. And this is what I wanted to happen, actually, which is nice. It ran into an issue with one of the summary rows in the subtotal. So what it's doing now is it's actually going to fix the script's filtering logic so that it doesn't catch the subtotal or the credit terms or something like that. Okay, cool. On the right-hand side, it's extracted this transcript, looks pretty good. And now what it's going to do is spawn all 3 formats in parallel, which is its way for saying it's going to rewrite my main transcript and turn this into like blog posts and Twitter threads, whatever the heck it's going to do. While all of this is happening, this is me pictured. I'm just manifesting all of the skills. I don't actually have to do too much. I just kind of close my eyes and wait, and then they appear. Taking a look at this tweet thread over here, let's just make this look a little bit prettier. We now have a bunch of tweets that are divided, and this is automatic, which is pretty cool. A 16-year-old posted a prompt on Twitter. Former professional web designer copy-pasted into Gemini. The AI produced a better site than he could in 5 hours. In minutes, design is commoditized. I'm sure you guys have seen these sorts of threads all over the internet. Let me tell you why. It's because people have built very simple repurposing pipelines like this. And although that one just took me 5 seconds, the content's reasonable. I'm not going to say it's going to win any awards. It's pretty LLM-y, but hopefully you guys could see with at least a few neurons between your 2 ears, you guys could repurpose, change the tone of voice, and so on and so forth, and make it something actually pretty cool. Likewise, we also have LinkedIn posts, and then we even have a newsletter draft for me. So that's pretty sweet. You can see that its design decision was to do this via Sonnet subagents. You guys can modify this SOP at any point with literally just a line. Finally, in the middle here, skill 2 is all good to go. Great job. It's gone through and it's actually updated the main skill as well, which is quite neat. If you guys were paying attention, you would have noted that every time that we add a new skill or change skills or whatever, there's a top left folder over here that's .claude/skills that changes. And this is essentially the format and file directory structure of a skill. So it's worth us pointing it out. Now, in case you guys have never seen this convention, in the top leftmost corner, you see how there's a little dot in front of the Claude folder? Well, that's basically just the kind of universal file explorer convention for hidden. Now, if I open up this exact folder, the skills example folder in my macOS native file explorer, you notice that it looks pretty different from what we're seeing over here. Notice how on the left-hand side, we have .claude.tmp, then we have 1 second copy config data. And notice over here that the list actually starts at 1 second copy, then goes claude.md, then it goes config, and then it goes data. So, I mean, aside from the fact that this is organized a little bit differently, generally speaking, we always have folders organized first in the file explorer here. So if we kind of match that up one for one, you'll notice that the only things that are missing are basically the files and the folders with little periods in front of them. So the first thing to note is, like, most people just have no idea where this thing is because when they go to the file explorer, like, it's always hidden. Well, in Mac OS, it's pretty easy to reveal. You just go shift command dot period, basically, and then you can show all hidden folders. They'll be present. It's just they'll be a little bit more translucent. And then we can actually open it up and then go through all the skills. Okay, so that's the very first thing to know. On Windows, which you guys may be using, it'll be a different hotkey. Just Google it. There's plenty of information on there about hidden files. I think you can also just right-click and go like show hidden files or something, because I used to have a PC and that was pretty straightforward. But yeah, essentially inside of every main workspace in any sort of IDE, if you do have skills, they're probably going to be hidden from you, which is kind of difficult and intimidating to kind of understand. Okay, so then after that, the way that it's organized, which is not super plainly clear here, so to make it a little bit clear for you guys, is you have the .claude folder, right? And then underneath the .claude folder, you have the skills folder. Then underneath the skills folder, you actually have the specific skill folder that you want. So let's just go, inbox cleaner. That's another folder. And then inside of that folder, you actually have the skill file itself. So then you have the skill.md. So notice how nested this is. I mean, it's a massive pain in the butt. I don't know why they do it like this, but they make it pretty difficult for most beginners to understand. And they do so in this sort of like hierarchy that begins again with .claude, then goes skills, then goes in, the specific name of the skill, and then the skill MD itself. And then over here, okay, and this is sort of optional, but this is how Anthropic typically does it. Here you can put your other stuff. What is your other stuff? Well, your other stuff is going to be things like your scripts. So hypothetically, if you had like scripts that helped you do the invoice cleaner, inbox cleaner or whatever, maybe an inbox -cleaner.py, you'd probably put it somewhere in here. I personally like doing it in a different folder called execution. Sue me. I just think it makes more sense, a little bit cleaner. Likewise, if you have, I don't know, like your Gmail auth tokens or something, you might include them over here. If you have, I don't know, some other file like example.txt, you'd include it over here. And so this is just like the base way that all skills are organized. And yeah, I think it's just unfortunate that it's usually in a hidden folder, which is kind of intimidating. I should note that the skills live right alongside a bunch of other hidden folders like agents and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about this now, but if you want more context on that, just check out my full-length Claude Code course. I got a ton of juice for you in there. Okay, last thing I really want to do is just talk a little bit about what skills are actually worth making. I do a lot of business consulting now. As somebody that started in door-to-door sales, I saw the importance of focusing on the levers that actually increased revenue first and foremost above all else. And so for me, it was always door-to-door. But then transitioning into marketing and then broader through things like content creation, articles, and now videos, I think a lot of people are very misaligned on what like a high revenue SOP even looks like to begin with. And the reality is, with agents nowadays, you can do anything, but that doesn't mean that you should do everything. These things are so damn good, they can of course design whatever crazy back-end fulfillment pipeline you want. But I find most of the demos on the internet that talk about stuff like that really miss the mark because we've been able to design these pipelines forever. And most people that do these sorts of things still don't make any money. The difference between people that use new, upcoming, and trend-breaking technology to make money and actually have big, success outcomes versus people that play shiny object syndrome all day and just collect a bunch of Pokemon cards are the former group focuses primarily on the front end of their business. So they focus on the acquisition of opportunities. They focus on the generation of leads. They focus on mechanisms that improve the quality of the sales experience for their leads. They focus on selling, closing mechanisms, and so on and so forth. And then the latter people just overcomplexify the hell out of everything and then make every excuse under the sun not to focus on sales and marketing. So this is all just like a pretty meandering and long way of saying, if you're going to design skills, I highly recommend you focus the design of those skills primarily on front-end tasks. Like most of the people that are going to be watching this video, they're probably going to have some sort of side hustle going on, or they're going to be looking to get into that realm. The simplest and easiest way that you can move the needle in your own business is if you're going to design skills and stuff like that, spend your time designing them on things that help get you sales, on things that help, you do your marketing faster and better. And then don't just have them sit around in your folder, actually use them. When I was growing my business, I was doing somewhere between 50 to 100 cold calls every single day. When I was going door to door, it was something like 80 knocks on physical doors per day. I wish I had 100th of the technology we have today. And I'm not even that old. To go back and then automate that process for me. I don't. But it blows my mind how many people do, and then they choose not to use it on things that actually make money, like those laborious door-to-door sessions or cold calls or whatever. Okay, so ultimately things that I have seen work really, really well. Content repurposing pipelines. These genuinely can significantly improve your reach, assuming you're growing a brand. That's for inbound. Lead generation systems. Things that do stuff like scrape leads for you. Those are really big. Skills that use Chrome DevTools MCP to post on forums automatically for you, to do product research quickly and then tell you which threads are saying bad things about your product. These things are valuable. Skills that quickly go through a bunch of books and identify which things are business expenses and can be written off versus things that aren't. These sorts of skills are valuable. The skills that are not super valuable are like skills that help you build other skills, or skills that invent some new design framework that assists you in the building of AGI, right? These things are not ultimately the stuff that I want you to take away from this video. I want you to focus on real practical use cases that actually move the needle for your own business or the businesses that you're working with. Because at the end of the day, that's the stuff that's going to make the economy more efficient. That's the stuff that's going to make you more money as AI swallows up more and more knowledge work. All right. So hopefully I didn't bore anybody to death. Guys, I'd like to make a big ask. If you guys like my content, please subscribe. I realized the other day that 69 point something% of all of the people that regularly watch my content are not subscribed. That means about 2 out of the 3 people that I'm talking to right now, for whatever reason, haven't. If you like the sort of content that I make, the algorithm really does like it if you subscribe, and then it pushes my YouTube channel to a bunch of new audiences. But if I don't get enough subscribers, then none of that stuff happens, and then most of my videos bomb. So I really appreciate anybody that has taken the time and energy to subscribe, and I'm not going to do a big cry session here, although as a newbie YouTuber, I always wondered why everybody was pitching me on subscribe this, subscribe that. And now I think I get it. Most people just never do. But yeah, I would really appreciate it. Aside from that, if you guys like this sort of thing, just leave a comment down below with any sort of question or recommendation as to future content, and I will happily take that into consideration. I have skills that now scan my YouTube comments and then use that to help me ideate new videos to make and so on and so forth. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff in the works for you guys, but I'd definitely love to know what direction to take it. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely rest of the day.